Welcome home. We are WNST, Towson, Baltimore, AM 1570. We're BaltimorePositive.com. You want to check it out. We're celebrating 26 years, even though it says 25 on the cupcake. We're going to get that together with a new oyster crab themed logo with a Maryland flag. We're going to be doing 26 oysters in 26 days, beginning on the day the Ravens season begins, September 5th. September 4th, we're going to be at Coco's doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. Mark Viviano will be coming out, who gave me the best advice I've been given in the last 52 weeks. And I took his advice, and I'm in a writing project for any of you out there. We're doing a lot of things. Tech services coming back. A lot of columnists coming your way, a lot of letters to David Rubenstein. Chad Steele's going to finally get his letter, and Eric DeCosta is going to get a welcoming letter to the season, as is Lamar. I started writing a letter to Jim Palmer the other night, and I'm really looking forward to that one. That's going to be one of my favorites. The Gold Rush Sevens doublers will be with us at Fadley's on Friday as we get ready for the finale of fake football in Green Bay. Luke and I will be gathered before the Cheatstros and the Orioles get it going. The Orioles have their own problems this weekend. And our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions are the ones sending us out on the road doing this oyster tour. Luke doesn't eat oysters yet. Maybe next month he'll have one or two with me. I've been eyeing up all of these interesting chipotle lime, shooter, fried stew. I'm even going to the pepper mill. That's how excited I am about the month of September. But in the meantime, one more fake football game, Luke, and I was going to dispatch you out to Lambeau Field for that incredible practice on Thursday and all that. But I think the Astros being in town, we only have one press credential between the two of us. So we only be in one place at one time. I think you're better off at Camden Yards. But that being said, they're trying to get work done, and they're trying to make this roster, and they're trying to figure out pieces. And then it's going to be for us to make the guesswork the next 2 weeks as to what exactly we're going to see when they get together with the defending world champions and watch them raise the flag at Arrowhead Stadium.
Yeah, I mean, the opener's right around the corner at this point. I noticed this week, which was the last couple practices that are fully open to the media. Of course, they'll shift into regular season mode next week, where we only watch the first 30 minutes or so. But you see the coaches holding up the cards. You know, when you see the coaches holding up the cards for the backups, they're running Kansas City scout team stuff. So they're absolutely getting ready. But as you mentioned, trip to Green Bay, and I think for as much as there's no juice really for Saturday's actual preseason game, other than, the maybe 2 or 3 jobs that might or might not still be up for grabs, Thursday does represent an opportunity for the starters to get work in against another team. The most meaningful work they'll have this summer will take place in Green Bay, and having a chance to go up against the Packers and getting some competitive looks, albeit in a controlled scrimmage kind of setting, where they won't tackle to the ground and all that. But this is what qualifies as the most important work, or maybe the most telling work of the summer for the veterans, for the coaches to kind of see what it looks like in its totality, save for a couple players who are just nursing some minor ailments right now. But this is your one opportunity if you're Lamar Jackson or Marlon Humphrey or Ronnie Stanley or Justin Madubuike or Roquan Smith, or go down the list of their most notable players, a chance to go up against a team in another uniform to kind of see where you are individually, see where you are as a unit. I think there's a lot of curiosity and interest to see how the Ravens offensive line does against the Green Bay front. Not that the Packers are something extraordinary, but just it's different. It's not, you're not going against guys that you're so familiar with as you tend to be during the course of training camp, where what the guy's moves are in front of you. What his tendencies are because you've been practicing against him every day for the last 4.5 weeks. So I think there's interest from that standpoint. But it's one day, it's only one joint practice. John Harbaugh was asked about that. And I think you've kind of seen around the league, these joint practices that last multiple days, that tends to be when some of these fights break out because, the competitive juices get flowing and maybe it carries over from the previous day. So they're just doing the one day. They'll play the preseason game on Saturday, which I expect it to be very similar to what we saw the first two games. Maybe they pull out a couple guys. Trenton Simpson would be an example of someone who to me got enough work in the first two games. He's going to start, next to Roquan Smith. There's no question about that. Does he really need to play all that much on Saturday? So certainly not going to see any of the veteran players that we didn't see in the first two games. They're not going to suddenly play in this game either. So there's not a whole lot of juice for that unless you're really a hardcore fan that's paying close attention to the back of the roster. As I said, maybe there's 2 or 3 spots up for grabs. Maybe not. There have certainly been years where I know they've gone into the preseason finale with their 53-man roster all but decided, right? And other than an injury or someone does something that's so extraordinary or something that's really below the bar, and maybe that changes their mind about someone. But by and large, they usually have most of this set. They'll have final cuts on Tuesday. Keep in mind, with them having that Thursday night opener, they actually next week, normally it's Labor Day weekend when players will get some time off. They'll be eyeball deep in Kansas City prep by that point. So it's actually the middle of next week where they'll get a little bit of time off, and then they'll reconvene back in Owings Mills for the weekend, next weekend, Labor Day weekend, because they play on the 5th. So it's just about here, and they're already preparing for the Chiefs. As I said, you've seen it in practice this week, but certainly some, at least some very, very mild relative interest to see how things go against the Packers in the joint practice. But again, paramount is staying healthy, not getting anyone hurt that's going to jeopardize their status for week 1.
My old buddy, Doug Russell, I worked with him at Sporting News Radio 25 years ago, reached to me. He does the Packers pregame show, TMJ, I believe it is, in Milwaukee. So they do the Bucks and all that. And I've known Doug forever and ever and ever. He was a big advocate of mine when my wife was battling, and we did 30 ballparks. We went to Milwaukee. So Doug reached to me this week to have me on his show, and we taped it for Saturday for the pregame show. And we talked Ravens football, and he's asking me about the team and different stuff like that. It was interesting. He asked about Mark Andrews' health after the car accident, because when a headline happens like that, is he going to be okay? And it was just sort of like questions about a team that ran the ball 3 times in an AFC championship game and what the expectations of Lamar are. And, even talking to people in Green Bay about like this team's expectations are they have to win the Super Bowl. I mean, like that's where it is. And that's just a whole different level of something in the end of August than any of my friends who are Dolphins fans or Packers fans or Steelers fans, even at this point, because I don't think there's a lot of places where it feels that way. There's only a handful of places where you're like, you got to win the Super Bowl. I mean, I think the Lions sort of feel that way in some way. They feel like they can reach the ring, the brass ring. The Bengals always feel like they can reach it back because they got there a couple years ago. But, this is a place where there's a lot of hope. Here, hope of making the playoffs, hope of being the 2 seed wouldn't be good enough around here. And it really begins with this bang on opening night for the fans, for the country, for the mojo. And I said this to Doug, I'm like, they open up against the Chiefs, and the feeling around here is they're not going to beat the Chiefs. You know what I mean? They haven't beaten Mahomes. Like, until we see it, it's kind of like, how are they going to go out there and beat? Maybe they do. Maybe Derrick Henry runs the ball 28 times. Maybe they shove it down their neck. Maybe Lamar throws for 3 touchdowns and rushes for 80 yards. Maybe everything goes perfect. I don't know. And the Chiefs were havable last year. But I feel like all Packers fans and Dolphins, they all have one thing in common. They're all going to be watching Lamar and Patrick Mahomes play opening night. And it's as big an opening game, not because we're in it. It's just it's a Super Bowl to start the season. And hold on, because the couple of days leading up to that and whatever happens after that, it's going to feel heavy. It is. I mean, I've been the bartender around here for a long time, the day after losses. I'm not preparing. I mean, they think they're going to win. They're going to go out there and steal Mahomes' lunch and catch him early and get them all riled up. But, man, that place is going to be a cauldron on that. This is a big, big game. It's a game that, quite frankly, as I'll be writing to Chad Steele, I'm quite disappointed I'm not a real media member. This is the kind of game I like to go to. This is the kind of game I like to cover.
I mean, it's certainly exciting. I mean, as week 1 goes, you can't get any better than that, right? I mean, maybe the peak of Ravens-Steelers rivalry when, the couple times where they did meet in the opener, 2011 comes to mind, that home game. But, that wasn't a a primetime game. That wasn't the Thursday night season opening game. So
If the
there's plenty
Steelers
of
would have come
excitement.
here
I'm not of the
after
thought that
we
there's
won
no
the Super
reason to.
Bowl, that would have been a big thing. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, had we had that game here and it was us against Denver, us against Tom Brady, it would have been a big, big, big thing that we never experienced here.
Sure.
I'm saying out in Kansas City, it's a big, even though they won a couple times and whatever. I just, I long for that, right? We all do, right? We all long for that night.
Yeah, sure, sure. Well, I long more for a Super Bowl more so than the Week 1 game. But yes, that comes with winning a Super Bowl. But I think, look, it's a big game. I kind of disagree. There's no reason to think they can't go to Kansas City and win. The Chiefs, a September game, a regular season game is not the same as January. And that's where I'm going to stress, if they do win, it doesn't prove anything other than, hey, it's a great season opening win. They beat the Chiefs back in 2021 in their home opener, which was a Sunday night game. And we know how the rest of that year played out because the injuries were just so impactful and so heavy that they fell apart down the stretch, specifically when Lamar went down. But, it's a big game. I think there's absolutely a little more of a psychological impact one way or the other, win or lose, that could linger for them a little bit. I think it could be a nice injection of early season energy and optimism if they win. If they lose, it truly is not the end of the world if they lose, but there will be fighting that mental block of, here we go again, can't beat Kansas City, can't beat Patrick Mahomes. But you look no further than last year. Look back no further than last year. Detroit, who at the time, I think the Lions were perceived as being on the rise and improving, and they had the good second half of 2022 after getting off to a bad start. But no one thought the Lions were going to go into Arrowhead and win, and they did. So,
And it turned the lights on for that franchise
under the sun.
year.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you never really know. And again, you know me, I'm not going to be the guy that's going to make too much out of a game in September. I'm just not. But sure, it can absolutely galvanize them a little bit. I think it can energize a fan base that, quite frankly, the sense I get, I think people are excited. It's football, right? I mean, it's the NFL. People are excited. But relatively speaking, I do think I don't know the right way to describe it, but I do think there is very much a sense of, all right, this is great. It's going to be fun. And we're going to go to the games. We're going to watch them on Sunday afternoon. And we're going to have some beverages and enjoy the company of all of our friends who are football fans. But I think there is very much the expectation of January and what happens in January and breaking through. And you mentioned hope. It's not hope. It's expectation at this point in time that nothing they do is really going to feel good enough until it's breaking through in January. And
no, I think in other places they have hope. Here they have belief. No, but a lot of places where you hope your quarterback can do it, they know this guy can do it. And that's what I'm saying. Like, in other places, they don't really think they're going to win the Super Bowl. That would be wow, and a lot of here.
Right.
No, here it's that or else. And that's a weird thing. Here.
Right. Well, and that's what hope is something where you're saying, if things go right here, it's, dare I say this word, it almost feels like it's becoming a demand, right? Like, you guys have to break through. Being the number one seed isn't good enough anymore. Having the best record in the NFL and the best point differential in the NFL isn't good enough. We've seen that. We've seen that twice in 5 years now.
Not good enough, Lamar, right?
Right. Yeah. Not having, 12 guys making the Pro Bowl like they had back in 19 or 13, I think it was. They've done everything there is to do in the regular season. And let's be clear, that's a compliment to them in a warped kind of way, right? But it's also a curse in the sense of understanding just how long a season is, just how difficult it can be, understanding the attrition of just injuries, and not just attrition in terms of injuries, but knowing that they have new coaches on their staff, knowing that they're not as deep as they once were. From a roster building standpoint, and some of the depth pieces that they lost in the offseason. Understanding that you're counting on some really young, inexperienced players at some key spots, mainly the offensive line, that there are going to be some hiccups. I mean, there are going to be. They could go out.
By the way, let's talk about the coaching on the offensive line. We haven't talked about Joe D at all, not even a little bit.
Right. I mean, when Joe D'Alessandris goes down, then you bring in an experienced assistant to take his place. I mean, that sounds fine on paper, and that's not something that's going to make the talking head shows. That's not going to make it on ESPN or NFL Network as a headline, but that's a headline for this football team right now. When you're talking about trying to sort out a, you know, a group that has three new starters any way you slice it, right? So, I mean, that's a challenging place to be in.
And
So,
unproven,
that doesn't mean that.
unproven guys too, not just new starters, unproven guys.
Sure. I mean, it's just, that it's definitely something that it's part of it, and it's another complication. So that doesn't mean that they're not going to have a competent offensive line. That doesn't mean that they're not going to have a solid offensive line. Doesn't mean the offensive line won't be really good come December, but it is unknown. And I thought it was interesting. John Harbaugh was introspective, this week when he was asked about this, and he kind of went into what he holds on to when he talks about the offensive line specifically is how good can these guys be? What's the upside? I see the improvement, but he also went on to acknowledge, I get the questions. I understand why that's a major topic of interest. I understand why there's some concern there. So for him to say that, and look, we all know whether we're talking about John Harbaugh or Mike Tomlin or whoever the head coach is around the National Football League, there's a lot of ego and bravado, right? And there are the times where they bang on the podium and say, no, that your questions are ridiculous. This is going to be something that's really good, even if the coach may not believe that deep down. But this was a time where John Harbaugh, he expressed cautious optimism. He expressed optimism that those guys are going to get better over the course of the year. But he also acknowledged that I understand your questions. Your questions are fair right now because he's looking at it through honest lenses and saying that, yeah, they are replacing three veteran players or two very much veteran players and another guy that started every game for them in John Simpson. So, it doesn't mean that the offensive line won't work out. It doesn't mean that it's going to be a colossal liability, but there's just a lot of unknown right now with that group. And it's complicated by the absence of Joe D'Alessandris. It's complicated by the fact that Tyler Linderbaum, albeit everything I've heard doesn't suggest that he's not going to that he's going to be fine, right? That this has been way more precautionary for him with, a little bit of a neck issue during training camp, but he hasn't been out there to build chemistry, on-field chemistry, and that on-field cohesiveness that you need as an offensive line, especially, on some of the inside zone, outside zone stretch plays, all these things where you've got to move as one. I mean, you really do. So those circumstances have not been ideal. It's great. Ronnie Stanley has been healthy throughout the summer. He has practiced every day. That is a credit to him and recognizing where he is at this point in his career. But it's also Ronnie Stanley. And we know how the better part of the last 5 seasons have gone for him in terms of health. So, I mean, there are a lot of unknowns here. So that's when you add the Joe D'Alessandris thing to the mix, it's definitely a concern. It's a fair concern. And John Harbaugh even acknowledged understanding those questions and understanding that there's, I don't know if he'd go as far as saying trepidation. I don't think John Harbaugh truly thinks that way about much of anything, right or wrong. But I think there's absolutely some unknown here as far as how it's going to look. I mean, Andrew Voorhees is going to be the starting left guard. I really do think Daniel Faalele is going to at least begin the year at right guard, unless they have a move to make that I'm not aware of at this point in time, which could happen, but I can't predict that until we actually see it. And I think, the way it's been trending the last week or two, I'm starting to think more and more that they're just going to go with the rookie Rosengarten at right tackle, instead of McCary. Now, I'm not quite as convinced on that, so we'll see. But point is, any way you slice it, you've got 3 new starters. And you knew what you had in Kevin Zeitler. You knew what you had in Morgan Moses. What you're going to have in Faalele and Rosengarten, or Faalele next to McCary, that's very much that's much more up in the air right now in terms of how it looks. So that's a major piece. And then when you consider that first audition is going to be going out to Kansas City at Arrowhead, which is already known for being an electric, difficult atmosphere in which to play. Super Bowl celebration night for them, and understanding that they have Chris Jones and a talented front, And I mean, it's a lot. So none of that's to say they can't go out there and win. I completely reject the idea that they can't go out there and win, but they're going to be the underdog, and they should be the underdog going out there to play Kansas City on the road. But we're going to see, and we're getting down to we're inside 2 weeks away, right? I mean, we're getting down to the nitty gritty here in terms of they'll make cuts on Tuesday, and they'll finalize at least their initial roster, and then we'll start to look at it through that lens. But we're here, right? I mean, it's easy to talk about OTAs. It's easy to talk about what the roster looks like in the spring, and who's going to start, who's going to step forward, all those different things. But now we're getting closer and closer to got to go out and play a game. All those off-season plans that you have that sound great in April, May, and June. Will it come to fruition, or will we be talking about an offensive line that looks in over its head, or a pass rush that doesn't have enough depth, or whatever comes up? Because
if you want to get people believing you're going to win the Super Bowl, go beat the Chiefs. Go beat the Chiefs on the road the first night, and that it wouldn't change the trajectory of people's thoughts or expectations for the team, but it certainly would validate the fact that we were the better team last year for a lot of weeks. We just weren't the 3 hours on that Sunday when we needed to be, but we went back out and validated that in some way, and controlled the game in some way. No, I mean, we're only judging the team by where they are now.
No, right? I understand. I'm not going to be the guy that makes too much out of a September win over the Chiefs. I mean, you got to do it in January. Like, it's just that simple.
Here's where I'll make a lot out of is Marlon Humphrey and Ronnie Stanley and Lamar Jackson have lost to the Chiefs more than they've won. And at some point, it's not baseball where we'll get the Yankees next month. It's you get one chance to get after them now to believe that if you see them again, it's been a long off season for these guys getting their ass beat the way they did. And I tell you what, for you and me, we've beaten them up a whole lot less, especially Harbaugh on 3 runs, and losing a home game and laying a friggin' turd, laying a steaming pile of poo on the turf down in the middle of downtown Baltimore in the biggest football game of the generation. One way to get back after that's to win next Thursday, right? Like again, you and I haven't been every day beating up the coach, beating up the run. I'm the guy that said they needed Derrick Henry all along. So they followed my prescription. Now go out and beat the Chiefs with Derrick Henry by running the football and controlling the game on the road in a night when that place is going to be an ish storm for them, when they're raising the flag out there, Mahomes comes running out, and I show me something. They'll really show me something. They go to Kansas City and win, because I'm really not expecting them to win. Am I hopeful? I mean, sure they can win. They were the better team all of last year. Go prove it on Thursday night that you're the better team this year. For now, right here, right now, show me that offensive line. Show me a pass rush. Show me that secondary getting after things. Show me a front that's going to be able to stop Mahomes and contain him, Kelsey. Show me you have an answer for Travis Kelsey. So other than Taylor Swift, is she still on tour? I don't know. But I'm sure we'll find out next Thursday if she's available or not, or where she is via satellite. But this is going to be fun, dude. Gonna take my mind off of baseball for a minute and a half.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tone setter one way or the other, right? I mean, if you lose, here we go again. If you win, hey, it's a heck of a step in the right direction. And again, I'm not going to equate it with exercising demons or anything like that. It's not, right? September 5th is not.
I don't think it's any of that, but I do think it's in the purple side's heads that
I just said it's going to set the tone.
And we had to sit here and pound sand and watch them win the Super Bowl. I mean,
I hear you, but they beat them in week 2 in 2021 also. Like they have beaten them in a regular season game. Right? I mean, they have. It's not the same, but it sets the tone. I agree. It sets the tone for.
It also sets the tone for where the game would be in January here or there.
Sure. I guess, but they played in Baltimore last year and it didn't matter anyway. So, I mean, from that standpoint.
Well, losing Kansas City, you'll have to go back there again in January. That won't feel good,
No, we don't know that yet. I mean, it's one game, right? I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. It's huge from a psychological standpoint. I'll say that. I think it sets a tone for being able to do special things. But I'm not going to be the guy that gets carried away about a September game. I'm just not.
Well, it sets the bar for where they are. and
It
we're this
does.
offensive
Sure.
line that we've had a lot of questions. They go out there and they win and they move the ball effectively and they defend effectively, and Lamar's Lamar and Henry's Henry and Zay Flat and Mark Andrews, and we get the stat sheet and it's just perfect, and somehow they win 28-23 because they Tucker hits a kick, and I'll hear all of that. They
Mhm.
figure out the kick return thing better than Dave Tobe. I don't know. That'll be interesting unto itself. I always find the Andy Reid Harbaugh thing interesting. And one thing I would say for you is them holding out scat cards and getting ready for Kansas City. They better get ready. I mean, Andy's owned John's ass too. And there's a lot of that in this relationship here too for Mr. Paranoia out there that bans media members. So yeah, I mean, I think this is a big game. I don't know. I disagree with you, dude. I'm not around there to smell it and feel it, but if we're sitting here on Friday morning talking about them being 0-1, that's they need to be 1-0, and that's a really hard thing to do. It's a big ask. I think it's a big ask for them. I do.
Okay. But I guess my point is, if they do lose, so what? Then expectations change. I mean, I just, it's a big game for week one. I get it, but it's week one, right? It doesn't prove anything one way or the other. I mean, it just doesn't. So I just, and I
It
get it,
measures.
I'm
It doesn't prove. I mean, my point is the measurement of. I have no measurement. They go out in these fake games. They don't do anything.
But September's not the same as January, is my point, right? I mean, go out and win. It's a great psychological lift, but it's 1-0. And if they lose, okay, they lost. I'm not saying the season's over if they lose. I mean, not far from it, because to your point, you kind of expect them to lose, right? So, I just,
that's not me. That's Las Vegas. That's anywhere you gamble, they're going to be an underdog, as they should be.
sure. Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, I don't know what it proves other than just, hey, it's great to win. It's great to set the tone, but we're 5 months away from anything that actually truly sincerely matters on that front, right?
All right.
So,
Then look, we'll just focus on baseball. I'm fine. I'm good.
no,
I'm
that's
done
not what I'm
talking
saying.
fake football. Let's get to see. By the way, the cuts and all that happens this weekend, and I should promote the fact that the WNST tech service has been on hiatus. I have noticed, so has Luke, and we've talked at length about that. Bill Cole and I did a whole segment about it. It is coming back to life. You'll see it soon, and there'll be new ways to sign up, which was really problematic, as I explained to Bill. So, that tech service and who's getting cut and all that. The one thing I said to Doug Russell is they'll pick somebody up from another team. They usually do. They find something attractive at a place that they have a weakness. And I said that always tells me how they feel about their team. If they go out on the wire and get a guard, if they go out on the wire and find a passer, if they find a Van Noy, a player, you know what I mean? If there's some guy in uniform next Wednesday that wasn't here last Wednesday, that won't shock me, and that will be a little bit of a tell for how they feel about their depth and how they feel about their young guys and their draft picks.
I totally agree. And I think where I'm really looking is, I mean, people will say edge rusher, and I get that. I don't know who's going to shake free that's really moving the needle in that way. I think for most of who would be available out there, it's not going to be someone that has more upside than their young guys. It might be someone that maybe has a very specific skill set, sets the edge well, something like that. But where I'm really looking is offensive line. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say that I think it's necessarily going to be someone that starts, but I think it could be a veteran backup type that gives them, another McCary kind of guy, where someone that has a higher floor, someone that if Voorhees or Falele really struggle at guard, for example, someone that could be plugged in the following week or 2 weeks down the road or something like that. Because that's where I look at this. We've spent so much time talking about the starters. What about the depth on the offensive line? You're okay. Let's assume you go with the young guys. So you have your 5 starters. Then you have McCary. You have Josh Jones, who is going to be the backup left tackle, I think. Although McCary certainly can play there as well. They have
Cleveland,
Nick Samac, the 7th round pick, who I think is going to make the team because he's kind of slowly climbed up the depth chart here over the last couple of weeks. Ben Cleveland. But then so you're at 8 or 9 there. You're at 9. Okay, who else? I mean, Big Sala, who, was the toast of the town, not the toast of the town. That would be major exaggeration, but was a guy of interest last year. going into training camp and starting training camp as the starting left guard. And he's completely fallen off from the moment they put on pads. They lost belief in him completely, and he's never recovered. I'm not sure he's making the team, let alone feeling that he's going to be any kind of a viable depth piece if these guys that are going to start week one don't work out and are struggling and you need to pivot. So that's where I look at this thing and say, is there some guard out there, a veteran guard out there who maybe isn't a player that you would view as a 17-week starter at this stage of his career, but can raise the floor of your depth and maybe give you a little bit of a safety net fallback option if Voorhees or Faalele do not work out? Because starting week one is not the same as starting 17 games. We've seen guys start week one, or we've seen guys thrown into action in week one, and they're not ready for it, or they're not good enough. And that's where preseason can be a fuller in that way. And we've seen that before. I mean, I can go back and probably give you 4 or 5 examples of someone that starts the year as a starter or the number 3 corner or, second tight end or whatever it might be. And then come week 6, they're not in the picture anymore. I mean, that's just the nature of the game. But that's the position, offensive line. That's really where I'm looking right now to say, is there someone that shakes free? Is there someone who a team's trying to save a few dollars on their cap, and you say, hey, we'll swap 5th round picks and we'll take that guy who's in the last year of his contract off your hands, and he'll be our backup guard, or he'll be another option for us, as a backup center, something along those lines. I'm looking for that kind of move. I think the reason why is it's one thing to talk about your starting 5, but I'm not sure there's a great deal of confidence that they have enough depth on the offensive line that they feel really strongly about. So through looking at it through that lens, that's where I could see Eric DeCosta making a move here. I don't think anything major, but I could certainly see them bringing in a veteran to try to fortify that group and, if nothing else, raise the floor of that offensive line.
All right, Luke and I are going to be doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour at Fadley's on Friday, getting ready for the Cheat Stros, and then we really get going. September 4th, we're going to be at Coco's with Mark Viviano. On the 5th, we begin 26 oysters in 26 days, 26 ways. We're doing it for the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with Liberty Pure Solutions, keeping your water clean and fresh. If you have well water, especially anywhere in the county, North County, they do a great job. They also do all sorts of plumbing. Our friends at Jiffy Lube Multi-Care putting Luke out on the road in Owings Mills and Camden Yards. And then the Orioles heading to L.A. next week as well. So Labor Day holiday, lots of writing, lots of letters to folks coming your way. My columnist coming back to life. Lots of new sponsors. The WNST Tech Service is returning. Our website's in great shape. Luke's been crushing it from Owings Mills down to Camden Yards. And hope the Orioles crush the ball a little bit more here over the next week or so. They're going to need to hit the ball. I'm going to need to hit the bottle if on the back end of this, if they go out to Kansas City and wet the bed to start the thing here. We are hoping for a very optimistic September. We're moving into that. Luke and I will be covering sports better than ever, as always, at WNST. Find us at BaltimorePositive.com.